I am very disappointed that you felt you couldn't discuss it with me.
Discuss what?
Sardines, graham crackers, ice cream, and this book. You're single and you're pregnant.
Oh, that.
Why didn't you come to me when it first happened?
I wasn't there when it happened.
What do you mean? You weren't there.
Wait a minute. Did you think that book was for me?
Well, I certainly don't think it's for Arnold.
Daddy, I'm not pregnant.
You went to the obstetrician.
Yes, I did, with a friend of mine. She's the one that's pregnant.
Do you expect me to believe that?
Yes, I do. You always said you trusted me.
I want to believe you, honey.
Oh, Daddy, you can. I'm not pregnant, honest. Not even a little bit.
For 4 months in early 1999, Dana Plato, once one of the most recognizable faces on American television for her portrayal of Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes between 1978 and 1986, had been living with her fiancé, Robert Menchaca, in a motorhome parked outside his mother's modest house in Moore, Oklahoma. For a former sitcom star who had once commanded $100,000 per episode and been a staple of network TV, the arrangement underscored just how far her fortunes had fallen. Far removed from the trappings of Hollywood wealth, Plato was living on the margins, marked by poverty, instability, and the unrelenting scrutiny of a public that had watched her unravel. Her post-Hollywood years played out in the tabloids: arrests for armed robbery and prescription forgery, stints in rehab, nude photo shoots, and a revolving door of failed comebacks. By the mid-90s, she had largely disappeared from view. The promise of her teenage years had curdled into a narrative of scandal and struggle. She was less known for her work than headlines about her troubles, which only deepened the sense that her brightest days were long behind her. 13 years had passed since she'd been written off Diff'rent Strokes, but there were now glimmers of hope. She had begun working with a publicist to ease her way back into the public eye, and on the morning of May 7, 1999, Plato sat down for a live interview with Howard Stern. Right from the start, however, any hope she had that the national exposure would kickstart a comeback quickly faded. Stern's trademark mix of harsh mockery and probing questions caught Plato off guard as he systematically explored her past mistakes.
That's just ridiculous.
Let her pee in a cup and pull out her hair.
You know, I'm sorry. It's just absurd. This is absurd.
Hey, give Baba Boo your hair right now. Can you pull one out of your beautiful head? Go ahead. Let me see you do it. Let me
Which one
see
you
it.
want?
No, the hair in your head. Can she use that hair in her lap? I'm sure it all works. Use the hair in your head. Give him a hair. And we'll test you.
Put it right here.
And we'll find out if you're on drugs once and for all.
To her credit, Plato remained likable and authentic, admitting her past missteps and claiming she was now sober. All she really wanted was to be afforded the benefit of the doubt by the media so she might have a chance to start over. But in making this plea, she came off as a bit disjointed and fragile. Far from being the spark to reignite her career, the interview, especially given the direction in which Stern steered it, served as a reminder of how far she had fallen. Those close to her would later say the Stern appearance was classic Dana, fiery and funny on the outside, while at the same time revealing a fragility brought on by years of addiction, failed relationships, and relentless judgment. Despite her hopeful rhetoric and claims of sobriety, Plato remained deeply troubled. Her drug abuse, once centered on illegal narcotics, had shifted to prescription meds. Her life remained marked by the same cycle that had plagued her since she left Diff'rent Strokes. Brief periods of sobriety followed by relapse, temporary stability undone by financial hardship, and lingering hopelessness. That afternoon, drained and dispirited from the interview, Plato returned to her motorhome. Later that night, alone and exhausted, a deep malaise took hold. She took large quantities of Lortab, a prescription painkiller, and Soma, a muscle relaxant. Each drug on its own can slow the body down, making a person drowsy or unsteady, but taken together, and in the kind of doses Plato swallowed, they became a lethal mix. The combination dulled her brain's ability to keep her heart beating steadily and her lungs drawing in air. Bit by bit, her breathing slowed, her body weakened, and finally, her system shut down. The next morning, concerned when she had not seen her, Menchaca's mother checked on Dana and found her dead in the motorhome. Dana Plato was just 34 years old. I'm Jason Beckerman.
I'm Derek Kaufman.
This is Last Days, Dana Plato.
When the toxicology report came back, the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office ruled Plato's death a suicide by drug overdose. Fans and friends wondered if she might have simply taken too much, an accidental mix of medications by a woman whose life had been overtaken by prescription drugs. But the coroner was unequivocal. This was not a tragic miscalculation. It was intentional. The evidence began with the numbers. In her blood were lethal levels of Lortab and Soma. These weren't therapeutic amounts. They weren't even the kind of double or triple doses sometimes seen in recreational use. They were, in the examiner's words, well above any range consistent with normal dosing. Context also mattered. Dana had just endured a high-profile, emotionally draining appearance on The Howard Stern Show. She had tried to project confidence, but friends later said she left the studio deflated and tearful. Investigators found no sign of prescription regimen or medical oversight. The pills weren't in standard bottles with dosing instructions, but in loose form, suggesting self-administration rather than a medical error. Then there was her history. Plato had attempted suicide before, in 1993, and had spoken openly about bouts of depression and self-destructive behavior. The autopsy revealed no injuries or signs of foul play, nothing to indicate that she had been coerced or had accidentally mixed medications. Put together, the toxicology results, the scene, and the life story created a clear picture for the medical examiner. Dana Plato's death wasn't an unpredictable accident. It was the culmination of years of struggle, a night when her despair outweighed her hope. For the public, the ruling cemented the narrative of a fallen child star unable to escape her demons. For those who loved her, it was an unbearable confirmation of what they had feared all along. Jason, I remember that Howard Stern interview quite well. And I was a big fan of Diff'rent Strokes, and she was a big part of it. So I remember her growing up, and her whole demeanor on that show was off. You could tell that it felt like a surprise, that she was caught off guard by the way she had been invited on the show, maybe falsely hoping or frankly being a little bit silly to hope that he would go soft or sort of help relaunch her career. But nevertheless, she seems taken off guard by it. And the sadness is sort of seeping through in that interview. And you can imagine with the history of drug abuse that this could just push her over the edge.
We'll talk more about the Howard Stern interview and the impact it had on him, really. But it wasn't just the interview itself. Howard Stern was himself. She got in, she sort of known what she was getting herself into, not justifying what Howard Stern did, but this is who he was, especially at the time. He's mellowed in time.
Yeah, that was his reputation. You're not going to go on Howard Stern and he's going to just sort of.
But the worst thing was the callers,
interview.
The people who called in, and he, that's again part of the shtick. The people who called in were merciless. I mean, they were awful to her, and she wasn't expecting it. I don't know if she wasn't a fan, but she really was looking forward to the national spotlight. Getting, Howard Stern at the time was one of the biggest things in media, and she went on there hoping that it would be sort of her road back into national prominence, and it really backfired on her. News of Dana Plato's death reverberated quickly across Hollywood, and the response was one of sadness tinged with inevitability. Todd Bridges, her longtime Diff'rent Strokes co-star, who remained close to Plato to the end, spoke openly about his heartbreak, acknowledging that while he had long feared this day would come, it did not soften the blow. Bridges had battled his own public struggles with addiction and the law, and he recognized in Dana the same demons he had barely managed to escape. He said, quote, "It hurts, because we were like family. I just wish she'd found the peace she was looking for." Gary Coleman, the most famous of the trio of child actors, also issued a statement, expressing regret that Dana had never been able to find stability. His own financial and health troubles had become tabloid fodder as well, and he framed Plato's death as a grim reminder of how destructive fame could be to children who were not prepared for its glare. Quote, "We grew up together in front of the world," Coleman said. "People forget. We were just kids." Other actors and celebrities who had known her during her peak of Diff'rent Strokes added their voices. Many lamented the way the media had treated her over the years, pointing out that the coverage often reveled in her mistakes rather than extending compassion. Former co-stars from guest spots and industry friends described her as sweet, funny, and vulnerable, a woman who never quite reconciled the image of Kimberly Drummond with her real self.
But the harshest light was turned on Howard Stern, whose interview with Plato the day before her death evidently left her shaken, depressed, and unstable. The broadcast, intended as a raw, unfiltered conversation, instead felt to many like a public inquisition. Stern pressed her relentlessly on her drug history, her arrests, and her troubled reputation, while callers mocked her live on the air. For listeners, it was painful to hear a woman already fighting for credibility have her every statement doubted and her sincerity questioned. In the cold light of hindsight, the interview seemed less like an opportunity for redemption than one final humiliation for someone already carrying too much. Stern himself addressed Plato's death on the air soon after, telling his audience that he had been genuinely sympathetic to her and hadn't intended cruelty. He played back portions of the interview and pointed to moments where he offered her encouragement, insisting that what happened afterward was beyond his control. Yet critics and fans alike couldn't help but draw a line between her appearance on the show and her final hours, wondering if the barrage of skepticism had tipped her fragile balance. Stern never quite apologized for the interview, but he did express sorrow at the result, and the video of the interview has never been rebroadcast and has been pulled offline altogether.
So there's a direct through line, right? She was a woman in great distress and
struggled with substance abuse
struggled
for
with
a very long time and suicidal attempts.
Yeah. So she puts a lot of stake in this interview, right? This is going to rehabilitate her. Maybe she can find her footing and get back into the industry a little bit. Probably a pipe dream, but nevertheless, this is what she wanted. So she goes on. It's a disaster. He mocks her. He's cruel to her. The callers call in and they're awful. And she then goes home that night and she kills herself. Does he bear blame?
I knew that was the question. I put 0 of this at Howard Stern's feet, and I know the temptation is just too pronounced to avoid the conversation. But this is a person who is battling demons. Her substance abuse was known, but ultimately, Howard Stern is not a malevolent figure. He wasn't sort of inviting her on to push her over the edge. He might have been a little bit more cautious or maybe researched a little bit more about her fragile state and maybe pulled some punches or not done the interview or what have you. But you can't really put this at his feet. He has to deal with this. He has to sort of live with that guilt. And he talks about it. He hasn't apologized. And I don't think an apology is really necessary. She obviously had some internal struggles that just coalesced at that moment with the interview and the humiliation to, have this deadly result. But I don't put the blame on him. And I think it's tough enough to have to live with this that I don't want to assign any additional blame on Howard.
I don't put any blame on him at all. I do wish he would have seen it. I do wish he
in the
would have
moment,
been more
notice.
Not even while she's sitting there, just knowing who she was. This is a woman who very publicly struggled with depression, with drug use. I don't know. You're right. It's totally unfair to put it at his feet. This is who he was, and people went on his show with fully aware of what they were getting themselves into.
Right.
I just wish, and maybe in hindsight, that he had been kinder.
I do,
but
I do too. It was also the era of the pinnacle of his sort of mean-spirited shock jock snark. The Howard Stern of today, I don't think would ever book Dana Plato.
Person.
He's at a different echelon, and he has much bigger interviews, but the mocking, sort of merciless sort of approach that made him who he is, and let's not forget that, the whack pack, the whole thing, it's why Howard is as famous as he is and signs $500 million contracts, is not the Howard of today. And I wonder, he's in this more reflective mode, what he thinks of this now. It's nice that they've pulled it all. It's very hard audio to discover and so forth.
You can find the audio. The video is
hard to find.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I don't think he would do anything approaching this, and I think he probably, in his heart of hearts, regrets doing that. And even though it's not an apology, he regrets that he did an interview.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a short break, and we'll return with more on the life and death of Dana Plato.
Dana Plato's beginnings as an actress had all the hallmarks of a success story. Adopted as an infant in 1964 and raised in the San Fernando Valley, she was already appearing in commercials by age 7 and had landed film roles by the time she was 13. But it was in 1978, when she was cast as Kimberly Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes, that her life changed overnight. As the sweet, level-headed daughter of wealthy Mr. Drummond, she became a familiar face in millions of homes each week. Critics praised her natural ease on screen, and fans embraced her as the big sister every kid wanted.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hello, Daddy. Oh, they're here. Oh, look at them, Daddy. Just look at them. Aren't they gorgeous? Real boys. Welcome, little brother.
In a 1979 review, Variety noted that Plato, quote, brought a gentle warmth to Kimberly that gave the show a beating heart, a line that captured the unique steadiness she provided in a sitcom filled with broad comedy. For a time, Plato was a bona fide television star, lauded for her charm, her warmth, and the balance she brought to a show dominated by catchphrases. All signs pointed to a bright and enduring career. But when Plato was 19, with the show in its 6th season and still a ratings juggernaut, Plato informed producers she was pregnant with her boyfriend Lenny Lambert's baby. It was Plato's hope that producers would write the storyline into the show. But that was a non-starter for them. The idea of a wholesome teenager suddenly becoming an unwed mother would have been unthinkable for the family-friendly sitcom. In the eyes of producers, it would have destroyed the carefully cultivated image of innocence that made Diff'rent Strokes such a hit. So rather than accommodate her, they wrote her out altogether.
Yeah, there was a real conflict. I remember this. I was a big
Yep.
fan of the show, and when she was written out of it and kicked off the show over this pregnancy.
And it wasn't unknown. The tabloids picked up on it. They all knew
Exactly.
about it. So it's not like they would have worked it. They couldn't not work it into the storyline.
That's right. I was young, so I wasn't completely aware of pregnancy, but it was a known thing that she was taken out of the show. And it was just this conflict. She was such a wholesome figure. The show was built around the antics of Arnold. So he being a little bit wild, or even Willis being a little bit of a wild child, and he was already starting to get older and get into trouble.
Yeah.
Didn't sort of run up against the show's
But
themes in
pregnancy
the
was a
way.
difference in kind.
Yeah, it's just a difference in kind. And Kimberly was the wholesome, sweet daughter who was the foil for all of this activity. So it was just a tough beat. And, Plato's departure was abrupt and devastating. With her character gone, she lost the steady paycheck that had sustained her family and the national exposure that had made her a star. And while the pregnancy was the public reason, those inside the production already knew Dana was showing signs of fragility. Whispers were circulating that she was experimenting heavily with drugs, marijuana, and cocaine, and that her personal life was an absolute mess. The combination of being cut loose at her most vulnerable moment and sliding deeper into substance abuse marked the beginning of her long decline. Adrift without the safety net of the show, she was left to navigate adulthood, motherhood, and addiction with almost no support. In the years immediately after her exit from Diff'rent Strokes, Plato tried to claw her way back into the industry. She picked up scattered guest spots on television and low-budget movie roles. In 1989, she posed for Playboy, hoping to rebrand herself as a grown woman and shake the wholesome Kimberly Drummond image. The spread made headlines, but did little to convince casting directors she could reinvent herself, and it only deepened the tabloid fixation on her personal life. Instead, Plato found herself typecast in B-movies and straight-to-video thrillers. The slide from struggling actress to tabloid headline accelerated in 1991 when Plato made national news for all the wrong reasons. Broke and increasingly desperate, she walked into a Las Vegas video store armed with a pellet gun and demanded cash from the clerk. The robbery netted her less than $200, and she was quickly arrested. Just a year later, in 1992, she was arrested again, this time for forging prescriptions for Valium. Once more, she escaped with probation, but her public image was now firmly cemented. Dana Plato was no longer a working actress, but a fallen child star in a downward spiral. Tabloids began lumping her into lurid stories about the Diff'rent Strokes curse, portraying her as doomed rather than just troubled.
It's all the hallmarks of an addict, right? She's so down on her luck that she's robbing video stores for $200 in cash, and she's writing false prescriptions for Valium.
She lost the steady income. She is in truly a downward spiral. This is what happens when the desperation of the addiction meets the financial situation that you're in.
It's remarkable that she, according to her, and it was hard to confirm this, but according to her in that Howard Stern interview, she said she was making $100,000 an episode. Take her at her word. It's remarkable. And that season, she was on for 6 seasons, 22 episodes a season. I don't think she was paid the $100,000 throughout, but she made millions and millions and millions of dollars. But she just couldn't escape.
I often think, too, about the tragedy of her. She died so young, at age 34. There was time to rebrand herself in a different era where you can have sex tapes and it only launches your career and things like that. I remember the Playboy spread was truly like jaw-dropping because Kimberly Drummond was so wholesome on the show, and then there she is. She's trying to be the bad girl. Miley Cyrus did this with a lot of success.
None of it matters. It's the drug use that ended her.
Yeah.
Right? None of it matters. Even then, I understand your point, and this is 40 years ago. We react differently today to those kinds of things, but
you're right. The drug use X factor.
She could have found her way back. There's no reason. Like all those stars found their way back in some way, shape, or form, but she could never escape the drug use. Even on Howard Stern, she's like, "I'm clean and sober," but she wasn't. She was still using, like, not just
that's part of using is lying about using and so forth.
Exactly.
And
so she never was able to overcome that. And so, if we sort of did the counterfactual in the situation, it's one of these situations where it's hard to imagine a day when Dana Plato gets clean, at least at the age she was. Later on, maybe she does, but it's hard to imagine.
I think you're right. Tragic. It's a little bit like Chris Farley or Amy Winehouse, where it is only going in one direction. They never got it under control to the extent where they could pull out of that nosedive. And in the mid-'90s, she appeared in a string of forgettable, low-budget projects, including the 1992 interactive video game Night Trap, which gained notoriety because it was cited in congressional hearings about violence in video games. Subsequent nude photo spreads, sporadic talk show appearances, and scattered attempts at rehab only added to the impression of a young woman adrift, unable to shake free of the choices and circumstances that had defined her post-sitcom life.
In light of all this, it's easy to see why Dana Plato placed so much hope in her Howard Stern show appearance. After years of arrests, humiliating headlines, and career dead ends, the live interview to a huge national audience offered her something she hadn't had in more than a decade, a chance to tell her own story in her own words. To her, it represented the possibility of redemption, of convincing the public, and perhaps herself, that she was clean, stable, and ready for another chance. But the interview did not go the way she needed it to. Instead of a sympathetic reintroduction, it became a bruising interrogation, with Stern's probing questions and mocking callers reinforcing her sense of isolation. What was meant to be a fresh start ended up as a reminder of her past mistakes. And for someone already fragile, that failure was a devastating blow. The moment when the slim hope of a comeback gave way to the crushing reality she might never escape. Dana Plato's death became another haunting entry in the long list of child actors whose fame arrived too early, too suddenly, and without the safeguards to withstand its pressures. Like Corey Haim and Jonathan Brandis and so many others, she was swept up in the machinery of celebrity at a fragile age, celebrated on magazine covers, and then discarded the moment she no longer fit the image. Her story was mirrored in painful ways by the very co-stars who grew up alongside her. Gary Coleman, once the highest-paid child actor on television, struggled for years with poverty and resentment, and Tom Bridges, the third member of the Diff'rent Strokes trio, endured years of drug addiction and criminal charges before finally getting clean. After her death, Bridges, who remained close to Plato and often described their bond as that of kindred spirits who truly understood one another, spoke with both sorrow and affection about his fallen co-star. Quote, "She was such a light, she was such a spark," he said before adding a more personal reflection. Quote, "Dana, you were the one person I could always talk to. You were one of my best friends. I will never forget you, and I will love you forever."